Welcome. It is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Took a little bit of time off. You know, that sort of dry spot, that dead period from the Super Bowl, and now we're waiting for the combine and then the draft and schedule release, so on and so forth. So it took a little bit of time off, but hopping back on, we're going to start pumping out videos again. And one that I wanted to get to, I guess today or whenever you're watching this video, is the conundrum, the dilemma of what the Packers should do this offseason with cornerback Jaire Alexander. And it is Mitch M on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Always appreciate all the support as we try to build this thing up. Right now, if you ask anyone, there's almost like a unanimous opinion that the Packers and Jaire Alexander are going to part ways this offseason, and there's really no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like, you ask 10 Packer fans, I think 9 will say, hell, 10 at this point might even say, like, oh, yeah, it's just not in the cards. Jaire's going to be playing elsewhere next season. And, like, on the surface, if you look at some of the prints that have been left, you have Brian Gutekunst, the general manager, in his end-of-the-year presser saying things like, we can pay Jaire. We could have Jaire back, instead of more definitive answers. And so I get that there's, like, tracks that were left along the path that have people believing it is going to be a marriage that ends in a divorce, hopefully not a messy one this offseason, whether it's, Goody's comments at his end-of-the-year presser, Jaire at his locker the following day or 2 days after the Packers were eliminated by the Philadelphia Eagles, when he said something to the tune of, I have nothing to say, I don't even know if I'm going to be here next year. And then you have the injury history that's really started to add up. You're talking about a player in Jaire Alexander who has missed 34 of Green Bay's last 68 regular season games, only played in 7 this past season. And so I get that there's plenty of signs that would indicate it's time. And maybe it's best for both sides to venture off, for the Packers to part ways with Jaire Alexander and him get a fresh start somewhere else, and for Green Bay to then go on a search for its new number one corner. Of course, you had Keyshawn Nixon saying at the end of the season that he wants to be the cornerback one. And as much as I love Keyshawn Nixon, I'm sure many of you do as well, I don't know if he has it in his tool bag to be a true number one cornerback playing on the outside in the NFL. But I like his confidence and sort of his mojo and his approach towards the topic, just openly saying, like, yeah, I want to be the cornerback one. I think I can be that guy. With Jaire, though, like, what if Green Bay brings him back? It seems like every video, every clip, every report, everything coming out is just on the exact opposite side of the spectrum. Like, hey, it's, when are they going to part with Jaire? Are they going to release him? Are they going to trade him? If you trade him, you're not getting a premium pick. You're not getting a first or second round pick for a guy who has shown he has a difficult time staying on the field due to injuries. But what if Green Bay does bring him back? Like, I don't get why that question isn't being asked. And if you look at it, there are plenty of positives. Like, teammates still rave about Jaire Alexander. He is a voice that is heard. It's not in one ear, out the other. I know some fans might roll their eyes at some of the antics, some of the stuff he does on the field, the taunting. If you look at it, though, it's a pattern that has worked for Jaire. It amps him up. It amps his teammates up. The Packers are a better defense with Jaire on the field than when he's on the sideline in Packers apparel out due to injury. And so teammates still speak pretty glowingly of Jaire Alexander. I was watching a video that the Packers put out before the start of this season, and it was a short little 120-second video about Jaire Alexander and teammates talking about what he brings to the table. And you had, like, Christian Watson, Rashawn Gary, Keyshawn Nixon, all these teammates just speaking glowingly about Jaire. And obviously they're not going to go on there and bash him, but it's still very much so, appears to be, even if you want to slice it in half and just look at it from the defensive side of things. It's a defense that still can rally around Jaire Alexander as a vocal leader, a guy who he's the spark plug for the locker room. And so, like, when he speaks to his teammates and he's trying to get everyone revved up, that message isn't falling on deaf ears. Now, he's had run-ins with the coaching staff, the front office. You can see the suspension in 2023 when he went out with the captains, when he wasn't a captain for the coin toss in Carolina, and that was bizarre. Like, he has certainly butted heads with members of the staff and the front office. But with his teammates, it seems like a group that still looks at Jaire as a guy who can not only contribute, but be a vocal leader for the team. And I do think that's hard to find because most times you just want to anoint the quarterback as like the vocal leader of the team, whether or not the quarterback even wants that gig or wants to wear that crown as vocal leader. It kind of just comes with the territory of being the quarterback. But it's nice to have that on the defensive side as well. And Green Bay has a couple of those guys, like a veteran in Kenny Clark, a guy like Xavier McKinney, who backed up that free agent signing for Green Bay with his play in 2024. Jaire's just been in place a little bit longer with Green Bay than a guy like X. He's a little bit more outspoken, a lot more outspoken than a guy like Kenny Clark. And so it's not that anyone or that I'm seeing a lot of people paint things in a negative light about Jaire outside of bringing up the injuries. And again, missing 50% of the regular season games in the last 68 is a lot of missed time for a guy who's getting paid. And I'm not going, diving into the pockets, but he's getting paid as a top corner. And sometimes the best ability is availability. And he has shown time and again, that's been difficult for him to sort of navigate. But if let's say they trade Jaire, you're not getting a premium pick. If you get rid of him, you're taking on a dead cap hit of $18 million. You would net $7 million in cap savings, which helps. But for what the contract is and where the Packers are financially entering this offseason, it is not a crippling contract. Like, Goody is not looking at Jaire's contract saying, we have to get rid of this guy because financially to bring him back, it would devastate us. That's not the nature of the beast. And so that's also a plus, that you're not talking about a guy who's injured, having trouble staying on the field, and also the contract is eating away at such a huge part of the salary cap that it's crippling you. It's a big number, but it's almost more going down to the market value of what a corner is. Because when Jaire got his extension a couple years ago, there's been other top cornerbacks that have been paid top dollar since then, and so he moves down those rankings. It's kind of the nature of the beast. We see it with quarterbacks all the time. Like, the next big-name quarterback to get a contract extension done then becomes the highest-paid quarterback in the National Football League. And so I don't, teammates still love having Jaire around by all accounts. His contract is not crippling you. There's other angles of this too, like entering this offseason, I would say with or without Jaire in the fold, Green Bay has an area of need to address at cornerback. I do not think Eric Stokes is back. I like Carrington Valentine a lot. Can he be a number 2 corner? I hope so, but that means Nixon is your number 1. And again, I think if you have Nixon as your number 2 or if you move him back to slot, then what do you do with Bullard? Who knows? But if you have Nixon not as the number 1, and you have Carrington as the number 2 or number 3, it really boosts up the room. And again, the easy answer is if you bring Jaire back, he's obviously the number 1, but then you're trusting him to stay healthy. I think with or without Jaire, Green Bay has a need at corner. Obviously, if you get 2-3 out of the picture, it becomes a critical need this offseason. And there are free agent cornerbacks out there. Byron Murphy from Minnesota, Ward from San Francisco. Maybe you go get a Benjamin Morrison in the first round of the draft. There's options out there. It's not as though the Packers are just screwed if they get rid of Jaire. They can still go out and address it via free agency, maybe a trade, but doubtful, or the draft to bring in and sort of replenish the cornerback room and help boost it up more. But again, if not for the injuries, the easiest answer is just bring Jaire back, bring 23 back. And there is a huge risk in bringing him back because of the injuries, but you can't mistake this as a guy who's like out of his prime, because that's just not what's going on here. Like, Jaire Alexander is 28 years old. Is he like cemented into the prime of his career? I would say he's more like Myles Garrett. And we had a video on Garrett a couple weeks ago, and I think Garrett's 29, where Garrett is still in his prime. Jaire is still in his prime, but they're on the back nine. They're on like hole 14 or 15. Not maybe of their career, their playing career, but of being in their prime. They're teeing off on 15 or they're in the fairway on the 15th hole. Jaire, I still think, when available, has 3 really, really good years of football left in him. 3, maybe 4 good solid years. And so you can't mistake this because the Packers, whether Goody, Ted Thompson, when he was the general manager, they would probably never admit this on the record, but the Packers have run their organization like a team who would rather get rid of a player 1 year early than 1 year too late. And so I look at examples like Jordy Nelson, and when Nelson was in his age 32 season, he had a sub 500-yard receiving year. Again, when Jordy Nelson was 32 years old, his last year with the Packers, he started and played in 15 of the 16 games. So he wasn't missing time, but he had less than 500 yards after posting 3 straight 1,200-yard seasons or more. And so you saw the decline rapidly hit for a guy who wasn't hurt, was still out there playing. And the Packers said, we're just going to part ways. And obviously that can send a shock through the locker room for a guy in Jordy Nelson who had spent his entire career, a long career, with the Green Bay Packers. And we saw he went on to spend, 1 year or 2 years with the Raiders, and the Packers proved that, it sucks, but they were right. They cut ties with Jordy Nelson at the right time. Look at Clay Matthews as another example. Clay Matthews started all 16 games in his age 32 season, which proved to be his last for the Packers. And after starting and playing in all 16 games at age 32, Clay Matthews had a career-low 3.5 sack season. Green Bay cut ties. He played 1 year with the Rams. Clearly, I think he actually did all right with the Rams, but it was not prime Clay Matthews, and the Packers proved we parted ways at the right time. That's not what's going on with Jaire. And there's other examples like TJ Lang, Josh Sitton, Randall Cobb. Eddie Lacy, even though he was younger, that prime window was just a couple of years for Eddie Lacy. But there's countless examples of Green Bay looking at players and evaluating and saying, there's just not a lot of gas left in the tank, or they didn't believe so. And so they parted ways with franchise cornerstones, Jordy Nelson, Clay Matthews, big names that were in Green Bay for a long time, TJ Lang, Josh Sitton, Randall Cobb. And they proved to be right about those instances. Obviously, they got some wrong. Micah Hyde going to Buffalo. Casey Hayward when he went to the Chargers. I don't know if those were situations where Green Bay thought those players were out of their prime or just didn't want to pony up the money. Who knows? But this case with Jaire is not... I think it's easy to foggy up the picture and look at it and say, man, this guy's missed 50% of the games in the last 68 regular season games. He's washed up. It's damaged goods. When he's on the field, he's still very, very good. And I don't think there's any doubt that if Jaire Alexander is healthy and he is available, let's just say in an alternate universe, you could say, hey, you could tell Goody, we can promise you Jaire can start every game next year, all 17 of the regular season, whatever you get in the postseason if you make it. Goody saying, oh, well, if we have that, sign us up. Because the play is not deteriorating for Jaire Alexander. It's the availability. So this is not a similar case to some of these veterans we've seen in Green Bay in the past get snipped out of the picture at a time where Green Bay's like, we just don't think there's a lot of gas left in the tank. I think Jaire has plenty left in the tank, plenty left in his football career, prime years left. It's just the injuries. It's as simple as that. If not for the injuries the last few seasons for Jaire Alexander, there is no question entering this offseason about whether or not you're bringing him back. Because, again, the contract is not substantial to a point where it is crippling your salary cap situation, not even in the slightest. It's just not. And when he's on the field, he's still producing at a high level. Those are the two big things. You'd be bringing him back. But the injuries, you can't ignore it. And that's why I think it makes it so tricky. Yet everyone seemingly believes this will be the easiest decision for the Packers. I think there's a disconnect between him and the front office and maybe the coaching staff, maybe the medical staff about what's good enough to be able to play and not be able to play. Goody voiced the frustration that, from both sides, they want to see him out there because they know when he's out there, he can play at an all-pro level. And Jaire wants to be out there. But the injuries have sort of derailed those plans, at least the last 2 seasons. I think he's played 7 games in each of the last 2 years. Didn't play past, what was it, week 11? He tried to give it a go in Chicago against the Bears, and then, if I'm not mistaken, that's the last time Jaire was seen this season. And don't get me wrong about any of this. If Jaire is traded, if Jaire is released, I'm not going to be surprised in the slightest. Not in the slightest. The surprise for me comes from it being a situation right now where it's a consensus thought at the moment that all of this is a foregone conclusion that he's going to be gone. And again, if they trade him, if they release him, I'm not going to be shocked. Not one bit. Again, the surprise comes from if you took a poll right now, everyone just thinks he's gone. He's definitely gone. And maybe he is. But what if they bring him back? I think if they bring Jaire Alexander back, Packer fans aren't going to be like, oh, shit, like, what are we doing? Why are we bringing Jaire back? Because you know when he is on the field, what he can still bring to the table. And so that's why I think it's a very, very delicate, tricky situation for this front office and this coaching staff to navigate through the offseason, especially at a point in time right now where everyone just thinks he's gone. Like, he's gone no matter what. It's unanimous. Because it's a player that is still in the prime of his career, playing good ball at a very high level, just has trouble staying on the field. That's the big thing. You can't, with injuries, you can't predict it. Are there injury-prone guys? Some would say no. I do think there are athletes that have shown over time they're just more susceptible to getting hurt than others, getting injured than others. And Jaire has been one of those guys. It's almost like a relief just seeing him on the field because we've now become so accustomed to seeing him on the sidelines without a helmet, without shoulder pads, in a hoodie, in a T-shirt, just cheering on and supporting his teammates. But I do want everyone to think about that one question. What if they bring Jaire back? There becomes less pressure to immediately add at the corner room, but I think you still would, again, because of the injuries. But you're not going to find me upset or mad if they bring back 23. You're not. Not at all. I'm not going to roll my eyes. I'm not going to say, oh, gosh, here we go. No. I'll be completely fine with it. It's just at the moment it seems as though everyone and you're probably right. I'm not saying they're for sure bringing him back. Merely bringing it up as a question to you. What if they do? Because right now all the chatter is he's gone, he's gone, he's gone. And if he is, you've really got to address that cornerback spot. And that's not a knock on Carrington Valentine. That's not a knock on Keyshawn Nixon. Other guys in that corner room, Stokes, of course, as I mentioned, is a free agent. But it would have to be addressed. I think even if you bring 2-3 back, you have to address it in some form or fashion. So we'll see. But you're not going to find me being pissed off, mad if Jaire's back in the fold for Green Bay. We'll see what happens. It is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Always appreciate all the support. We'll see you next time.